Shalom, shalom. First and foremost, I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'ashem, Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders of Great Millstone that rule well, and peace and salutations to Yakim out there pushing this truth. This is the brother Rai again with another video for you, and I'm going to get into it. This is on the national interest, and it's called One Step Closer to a Bad Idea, a European Union Army. Now I'm gonna read through the article and get a few scriptures as well, and a few other things. So let's get started. Alright. Euro-federalists believe the time is right to push forward plans for creating a European defense force outside of nation-state control. Bureaucrats in Brussels have long yearned to control the armed forces of the European Union's member states, with the ultimate goal of creating an EU army. The United Kingdom has largely stymied these efforts, rightfully seeing them as infringing on national sovereignty and creating a competitor to NATO, which, how can if the EU does this, be a competitor to NATO since since NATO is mainly comprised of the EU? This is mainly just the United Kingdom and the US, which is Mystery Babylon, afraid that it's going to become a competitor for them. I'm going to get back to the article. Now, however, with the UK leaving the EU, Euro-federalists believe the time is right to push forward plans for creating a European defense force outside of nation-state control. I'm going to get a quick scripture. Alright, Revelation 17:12. And the 10 horns which thou sawest are 10 kings, which could be the 10... which are the 10 Eurozones, and the 10 kings could easily be those bureaucrats which are just talking in that first paragraph of the article, which have received no kingdom as yet, but received power as kings 1 hour with the beast, which is a future prophecy. And if any brothers watching this video believe I misused the scripture, feel free to comment below in the comment section. But I was mainly just using this scripture for the first part as the 10 horns which thou sawest are the 10 kings. Now I'm going to get back to the article. This devil. Should that effort succeed, unelected EU officials will decide whether or not to send their troops into combat. The decision to deploy force with potentially lethal consequences for some service members is one of the most sacred duties of any government. The idea that unelected, unaccountable, unremovable bureaucrats could send a spouse, child, or friend into harm's way should give many in Europe a pause. And I'm going to get another scripture. Joel 3:9-10. Proclaim ye this among the Gentiles, prepare war, wake up the mighty men. Let all the men of war draw near, let them come up. Beat your plowshares into swords and your pruning hooks into spears. Let the weak say I am strong. So as you can see, these European Union nations are they're getting ready for war because they see it's coming, and they know they can't rely on America. And to those of you in the States who believe this couldn't happen here, just remember that recently they're talking about getting women registered for the draft, so that's a sign of the times. Let me get back to the article. Yet this week, the European Council took another step forward in making that dystopian scenario reality. It signed off on the creation of the Permanent Structured Cooperation, PESCO. The agreement is not an EU army, but constitutes a big step towards creating an eventual EU army. Although ostensibly about coordinating defense procurement and pooling money and military capabilities, PESCO is another step towards the EU wresting more control of security matters away from individual member states. Of current EU member states, only Denmark, Malta, and the UK, which is leaving the EU, will not take part. Scroll up a little bit. Regarding PESCO, the EU Commission President Jean-Claude Juncker glowingly tweeted, "She is awake. The sleeping beauty of the Lisbon Treaty. Permanent structured cooperation is happening. I welcome the operational steps taken today by member states to lay the foundations of a European defense union. Our security cannot be outsourced." I'm going to get another scripture. Jeremiah 51:7. Babylon has been a golden cup in Yahweh's hand that made all the earth drunken, and the nations have drunken of her wine. Therefore the nations are mad. So as you can see, these nations are done letting America protect them because America hasn't been protecting them. America's only been using them for their own interests, which I'm going to segue a little bit off for a second to recommend a book called Gladio, NATO's Dagger at the Heart of Europe, the Pentagon Nazi Mafia Terror Axis by Richard Cottrell. And this is a really good book out there, Akim, and any of you heathens that may be watching, because it speaks about how since the beginning of the Cold War, a lot of terrorist attacks that happened in individual European countries were actually funded by the intelligence agencies in those countries, which were apparatus of EU and NATO. And it also, interestingly, at the end of the book, talked about how at the end of the Cold War, the Western powers needed a new enemy to continue implementing more austere measures and such. So Islamic radicalism was a good path to take. So that's something to think about, and I highly recommend the book. And it's only about 600 pages, which may sound long, but you got people out there reading Harry Potter, which is way more than 600 pages. So it's definitely worth the read. Let me get back to the article. In practice, PESCO is likely to be a big on promises and fanfare, but is unlikely to produce much in the way of additional military capability. The arrangement will not increase defense spending. Indeed, it may lead some European nations to spend less on defense. The only thing PESCO is likely to help create is a thicket of additional EU bureaucracy. With or without PESCO, NATO will remain the only institution capable of bringing real capabilities to bear in defense of Europe. That is not to say the Trump administration should not make its opposition to the EU's recent power grab known. The EU's continued drive towards defense integration conflicts with the 3Ds laid down 19 years ago by the Secretary of State Madeleine Albright, which is a devil, and I'm going to show you real quick. This is a quote. Look at this devil. She looks like a Rothschild, and she probably is. But it says, in May 1996, Madeleine Albright, who was then U.S. ambassador to the UN, was asked by Leslie Stahl of 60 Minutes in reference to years of U.S.-led economic sanctions against Iraq. Leslie Stahl: we have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that is more children than died in Hiroshima, which was an atomic bomb. And is the price worth it? And here's old Madeleine. I think it is a very hard choice, but the price is worth it. Just like in that book Gladio, how killing a lot of Europeans was worth creating a more austere security apparatus in the country, which is leading to the New World Order and more rights getting taken away for you heathens. But to the Akim and hopeful elect out there, it's beautiful. So I'm going to get back to the article. I lost my place. Here we go. I'm going to move up a little bit. Albright erected 3 guideposts for U.S. policy toward EU defense integration efforts. No decoupling of the United States from defense in Europe, and no duplication of NATO, and no discrimination against non-EU European NATO member states. These 3 Ds are today as relevant as ever. EU efforts at deeper military integration have not delivered increased military capability for the United States or for NATO. Instead, they compete with NATO for scarce European defense resources. Sorry, I'm a little slow up. Every euro spent on duplicative structures, take for instance the creation of an EU military HQ earlier this year, is one less that can be spent on actual capabilities, or one less bit of money or resources that can go back to the beast and the US and the UK banking power structure. Even coordination on procurement, research, and development that PESCO sets out to solve can be achieved more efficiently and effectively through bilateral or multilateral arrangements between individual nation states or through NATO. Moreover, EU defense integration discriminates against non-EU member states such as Albania, Montenegro, Norway, and Turkey, nations that are critical to maintaining peace and stability on the continent. Finally, EU defense integration is decoupling. The EU will never be able to provide the security which NATO and robust US participation in Europe currently do. Efforts that undermine the primacy of NATO for security matters in Europe, or which weaken the transatlantic security link, will serve to decouple the United States from the legitimate interests it retains in a peaceful and secure European continent, or enslaved and oppressed European continent. Because if Europe takes its power in its own hands and has its own military and has its own people looking after its own people, then just as stated in that book Gladio, they can't have more false flags to create this new security state, which is going to lead into the whole mark of the beast and whatnot, and more control, which a lot of these nations are starting to see. But in the end, they're going to go along with it because the people are sheep in those countries, just like in America, and they'll take anything that's coming to them. If they even know what's coming to them, which they should at this point, which is why 2018, the year of prophecy, is going to be beautiful, and I hope that many bad things happen through prophecy, and that it's an eventful year. So let's get back to it. The United States has sacrificed and continues to sacrifice much in terms of the blood and treasure to keep Europe free and secure. America's outsized influence in NATO is commensurate with its outsized investment. EU integration efforts threaten to decouple the United States from this investment and water down American influence in Europe and also American influence in the world, since NATO is pretty much America's auxiliary legionaries around the world to keep their power and control. And without NATO and the European Union, especially if they go towards the east with Russia and China, all those benefits of having a strong foundation to back your military power is going to slip right through their fingers, and they won't be able to do anything about it. And they'll just have to rely on their U.S. Military troops, which are already spread thin around the world, and they really can't do much anything, as you can see in Afghanistan and Iraq, and if we want to go back, even Vietnam. So let's go back and finish this out, Ak. History has shown that EU defense integration efforts are highly unlikely to lead to increase in European capabilities. Worse still, they undermine NATO, American control, the ultimate guarantor of security, false security, and false flag terror attacks in Europe, and weaken the transatlantic link, or the American hegemony and empire. The United States should help Europe correct course by advancing a NATO-first agenda, or American first, that ensures American engagement and influence in the continent's defense. That pretty much finished my sentence, as you can see. American engagement, influence, which is what this is really all about and what it's ever been about. So it's going to be beautiful when this does happen, and you can see, let me get one last scripture. Revelation 17 and 16. And the 10 horns which thou sawest upon the beast shall hate the whore, create their own European army, and shall make her desolate and naked, and shall eat her flesh and burn her with fire. When Yahushua Hamashiach comes back and has those countries release all their 200 million nuclear missiles onto this side and just completely eradicate it and eat her flesh and burn it with fire. So as you can see, Akim, with 2018, it's only getting better and we're getting closer to salvation. So just hold on out there. And I'm going to say all honors, praise, and glory to Yahweh, Ba'asham Yahweh Shai. Double honors to the apostles and elders and great millstone that lead well, Salakia, and peace and salutations to Yakim out there. Shalom.